It's funny, I'm reading these chapters and some lines spark such a vivid memory from back when I was traveling in Europe myself. To the fans who don't know, I originally wrote this manuscript and had titled it A Summer Abroad, and that was the nonfiction version. And I wrote it feverishly, February of 2014. I had just read On the Road by Kerouac, and so I was like, I gotta write this, no paragraph breaks, no breaths, nothing, just a straight flow, scroll style. And I was working at the Long Center in Austin. And so between selling tickets at the box office and just chatting with my coworkers, I was just feverishly writing on this Word document on a USB drive. And yeah, it was called A Summer Abroad. It was all real. But then as the years went by, because I published this 5 years after starting that, 4 or 5 years, I just kept adding and taking away and fictionalizing. So now it's funny because some of the lines, for example, playing beer pong with this Rick was a real story, but then there was no mosaic on the floor with Amsterdam's red and black triple X flag. That was just something I thought would be cool. So anyway, coming up is chapter 3, yay, and a lot of this did actually happen. Coming up, I just kind of quickly skimmed it. It's a 10-pager chapter, a little bit on the longer side, more in line with what chapter 1, part 1 was. But yeah, I think this chapter earns its 10 pages in that it sort of sets the scene for what will be the deeper tragedies in the second half of the book. So nothing left but to jump right in. So chapter 3 says, downstairs, we checked out. Rick surfed the web for a train that would take us to Brussels, while I sat next to a blonde and a brunette Argentine in the cafeteria, and with 2 heavy stones for flints in my forehead, sparked hungover conversation. After a joke about how what we can't see is sometimes closer than what we can see didn't translate, the fulana rubia walked up to use the restroom, leaving La Morocha and me to chat one-on-one over breadcrumbs and crumpled napkins. La Morocha brought up Spain and told me she had studied abroad in the capital city the year before. She was going back. Por los españoles, me imagino, I said, getting a laugh. Hay un chiste entre los gallegos, she said, switching to her best Spanish lisp. Un gallego le pregunta al otro, pues López, ¿cuál está más lejos, Madrid o la luna? López responde, mi amigo, ¿tú ves a Madrid? No, dice el amigo. ¿Y tú ves a la luna? Pregunta López. Sí, dice el amigo. Entonces, dice López, ¿para qué me preguntas? We laughed some more, looked down at our plates after. Then we got to talking about Barcelona. She told me I had to check it out. Ya sabes cómo los latinos siempre hablan de Barcelona, Barcelona, Barcelona. No, pero sí, es muy lindo. Te va a encantar. I didn't know she meant encantar literally. I almost told her I hadn't bought my ticket there yet, but felt awkward admitting it. She interrupted to ask if I was staying another night in Amsterdam. No, I replied. Mi amigo y yo nos vamos hoy a Bruselas. She tapped on her empty glass, the juice now gone, and she looked out the entrance to the room. After a minute, she mentioned Cortázar had been born in Brussels, talked about him a bit, and then said, una pena, te hubieras quedado. Hay alta joda acá en Amsterdam. Por eso nosotras venimos, para fumar y coger. The melody of a bandoneon walked 8 steps from the exit sign, then danced the tango around us. Mira vos. The first hour of the train ride to Brussels, Bruselas, or whatever, was spent recapping Amsterdam, writing down what had happened, thinking about how quickly it had gone by and how quickly most of the remaining cities would go by, all the while listening to Daft Punk and reflecting on their lyrics, which can be anything from a one-word chant, my favorite, to a whole string of storytelling lines. The song Touch, featuring Paul Williams, is an example of the latter, as well as the duo's finest, the centerpiece jewel to the Ram album. The song, from its broadest interpretation, is about humanity, or more precisely, about the loss of humanity to technology. The Phantom's babbling voice during the track's intro is trapped inside a senseless vat, spinning in a pool of nostalgia, hallucination, and long-forgotten emotions. He cries out for and eventually remembers the truest emotion of all, the one you have to appreciate and risk everything for, or watch it shrink. To appreciate takes effort. To not try is to betray yourself. We have two options: possible failure or eventual loss. You'll rip yourself apart in either case, but at least you have tried. You'll have felt something more. Better pathetic than apathetic. You'll feel human. Most don't even realize what they are. Think they need something more, something distanced. They'll make fun of two dummies on a Euro trip because it is easier to criticize than to adventure. But you don't harm. You have everything you need. You just can't see it sometimes. The last hour of the train ride, Rick and I were on the bottom deck, facing one another. Rick played indie pop off his phone, could tell by the bobbing sway of his ponytail, but then got bored and moved on to something more shoegaze, could tell by the whoosh blasting out of his headphones. Then he got bored of that, so he tied up his bootlaces and scrolled through old playlists for that perfect song he didn't remember the name of yet, but knew he had. He was fanatic for world music, though he called all music world music. A baby in his own universe he is. Our radio show morphed world-centric as our one semester on the air spun along. "Let's call the show Kaleidoscopic Expeditions," he had whispered to me, handing over the mic during our first set. It was the best name for anything we had ever done together. So the name stuck. We would walk into the station, usually high, drunk, or both, with just enough precious minutes to whip up a playlist at the tail end of the station's 1 to 3 a.m. slot. Keep Punching Joe Show, centered on Lone Star folk. Rick would sketch a route of countries from his personal catalog of at least 2 songs from independent artists per country, while I got microphones checked, levels prepped, and the audience hot. By the end of the semester, I was calling them dear listeners and fellow expatriates, and that was our system. Rick laid down the tracks, hit beats, and I hosted the show. On stage it was the same, only I sang. That's how we played together, whether at the radio station or a show. "We got some tickets to give away, I'd say. Isn't that right, Mr. Callahan?" Rick would cue the sound of a monkey saying hello in its own language. "He wasn't talking to you, Mr. Chimp," Rick would interject. "That's right, Mr. Phantasma. We got a one-way ticket to," and then announced whatever country we were visiting sonically. On one program, for example, Rick took the expats and me from the landlocked nation of Macedonia to the Himalayan mountains. We called it Alexander the Great's Morning Mix. For Rick, it wasn't difficult handling a wide variety of music, not only because the expansive repertoire in his noggin constantly updated itself, but also because he was naturally attention deficit. It showed in his drum playing. He rarely played a straight 16 bars without fills. On nights we switched roles. I cooked the playlist, he dished them out. He would skip the songs I had so carefully crafted right after their first chorus. I took those fast forwards as personal attacks against my more mainstream sensibilities. Later I recognized that that wasn't the case. Rick considered refrains something to refrain from. They were pop's crux fatale. A new beat to Rick was worth more than the last minute and a half of a song that had grown stale with repeated lines. "You gotta cure your music ADD," I would tell him on air. Mr. Chimp would agree. Rick only snickered. Sorry to disagree with you and our calm expatriate here, but the best and only cure to music ADD is the next song. And on he would skip, skip, skip. When Rick landed on Afro-Cuban All-Stars, he smiled and looked out the train window. Southern Holland fed his eyes, and black cables hung between the wooden posts parallel to the tracks, as wavy as sine waves. Rick's eyes shook rhythmically to the amplified groove of a rumba fiesta, left to right effortlessly. Synced his body and sound, now pulling out his drumsticks and tapping at the table between us lightly to the notes he read out of that train window. A landscape, some sheet music, beats hinted at what the Flemish had discovered centuries ago in oil pastels. What was the Black Peter elf called in Dutch again? I asked. The chit should I know, dude. We don't need to speak the douche anymore. We're in La Belgique now. By the way, I thought of an answer to your home question. You sound dumb when you mispronounce words. Home, he said, enunciating, is wherever me and my drumsticks be. Dude, that's lame. You've left and borrowed sticks all over. Anyway, do you know what the Argentine brunette told me? Rick took out his earbud. No, what? She said she came to Amsterdam to smoke and to fuck. Rick and I both laughed, but for different reasons. He could care less. He was happy playing with his wooden sticks. I tapped on the seat's plastic armrest with my 10 fingers. Tried to find a note of sense in our leaving the brick city. Couldn't. Tried to find a reason why we had to be on a train. Couldn't. Tried to understand how Rick could be so la-di-da about hooking up. Tried to survive the sexual tempest that brewing in my loins. Drowned. Why did we leave? The party in Amsterdam was just getting started. Sigh. The best part of any trip usually happens at the end, when you have to leave. The stuff in the beginning is awkward, and the middle could always be cut. If only I had let the spilled milk of my consciousness run its course from out my mouth to hers, instead of letting it spoil in there with the words, if only. If only I had said, Vamos al cuarto, nena, o vamos joder. That's all. Maybe a wink to show I wouldn't underestimate her. Bet you would have smoked out the blonde, though, I said. Yeah, he said, prob. But wouldn't you have been surprised? What? Not surprised, but wouldn't you have been caught off guard if someone told you they wanted to fuck like that? Nah. Not even a little? Nah. Maybe for you, I said. You grew up atheist. I rubbed the spot where my shirt covered my cross. For me, it's still strange. For you, Rick chuckled, slapping my hand. All that iconography's got you wound up. Just relax. Woman is the eternal mystery. I shook my head. Women have, but what? The two Argentines danced around in my head, giggled, and un amor verdadero me llamó. Nothing. Men and women are the same. We all want the same things. We all come from the same place. We all have our mother's X chromosome. Rick tilted his chin down and his eyes up at me. This isn't about biology. What's more biological than sex? Suddenly, two ladies entered our train car and walked past Rick and me in uniform steps. Their European curves swayed in a way I wasn't used to. Their sway had a style, a grace, a purpose comparable to, but unlike, the active, confident, meaningless swag of the American. They rounded the last seats and sat down. Rick, caught in his own world, still a baby in his universe, didn't notice. If you can get it, get it. That goes for men and women. Are you gonna get it? I asked. If it happens, it happens. I leaned sideways to look past him. I shook a grin and pointed down the aisle with my eyebrows. Huh? Do you see them cuties? He turned around, then back with his lips pressed. What should we say? I asked. He wrinkled his brow. I ain't going with you. Don't wimp out on me, puppy. Rick dropped his chin, dropped his headphones in, and got back to his tip-tap on the table. Is it because of Megan? She's in PR, a groupie. Are you not going to flirt because of her? I'm not asking you to hook up with anyone, just wing me. Hello? Screw you. For all you know, Megan is letting it happen to her from some buck back home. Rick scowled, continuing to read his landscape sheet music. He would cheat, just not make any effort to. Some things never changed. And yet, was this the same Rick? Would I be alone? Is Daft Punk relevant? What is this I'm feeling? The conductor mumbled something over the speakers and left us clueless as to when the next stop would be. This was my chance. I stood up, looked at the two ladies, and broke up their conversation to ask, "Is this Bruxelles Nord?" But they looked back at me, frowned, then turned back to talking between themselves in a gargled language. Rick and I plopped off the train and trekked an hour south from La Gare de Bruxelles Nord, through consonant heavy street names to our next hostel, where we checked in and kicked it by a pool table for a few hours. There we met a pair of cool Czech boys. They were doing the same run as us, but in reverse order, clockwise around the continent. We have no plans, the taller of the two said. No hostel booked either. We will leave Bruxelles when we feel like it. The shorter of the two, with not such great English skills, but enough swag in his bomber jacket for a platoon, let us know that he and his bud were going to a bar later that night. Ken's, he said. An Irish bar, somewhere in town. They raved about Ken's. Then they asked us about our Euro trip, but we bored them half to sleep about it, so enough was enough. Then they started talking about how cool Prague was, Praha they called it, and that we should check it out. They told us, however, to avoid some five-story club in Praha we were to visit. Alex, though, came to mind when Rick and I considered heading east. Did you see his message about renewing the lease? Rick, with one finger, swiped the air as if to show me how to delete an email, and then shushed me. So that was that. We high-fived and got the hell out of the hostel to go explore, cold cans in hand, busting out the door. The most impressive section of town was the Grand Place, a historic square surrounded by golden structures and rainbow-colored floodlights. Whether coincidence or destiny offered us the festival this exact weekend, a jazz one there'd be. Friday night, a flavorful lot, viral and vibing, played back-to-back, jam after jam. Huge 10-piece bands too, blue brass and slipped-in strings and countered with keys. Rick and I layered in lip toots and jingle jangles with our pint glasses, hiking boot tap dances, and air-swatting elbow flops. Rue de Boucher seemed loads of fun, but provided no shelter from the overwhelming dinner specials being shouted at us till, whoop, we stumbled out of nowhere to some little place called Ken's, which didn't turn out half bad. Flush went a urinal with a citrus fruit cut up in it. We had tried every beer and the virgin ones too. Not bad they were, till our bellies were full and we had to return after they had passed our bodies. Brussels was fine, you know. Breaking the seal was easy after a few many Blanche brews, and we were a bit spun from the drinking, but a thought bubbled up after using the restroom. It hit me. I was far, far away. The main bar area had red lights up above. The speakers were noisy, but past Rick, I saw the two girls from the train, the ones who had ignored me, more vividly than before. One had freckles and her hair was as red as Rick's. She held an empty glass out in front of her like a shield against a classist drunk that was pinching her elbow, while the other girl carried two sweaty glasses of wheat beer. Her hair was the color of the wheat beer, blanched, intoxicating, thick and yellow, the length down to her hips, and her lips were as red as the lights over our heads. It was them two for sure. My heart drowned in draft, and I slapped Rick awake and told him we should go and say hello before heading home. But of course he shook his head and dipped his nose inside the glass, breaking it on accident. Just then, Get Lucky came on, and I lost all inhibition. Live for the moment, seize the night, walk with the funk, and get drunk. I approached alone, and as I approached, I noticed the girls were surrounded by not one buffoon, but by a whole team of wrinkled old men, shaking euro bills in the air like they do on the stock market, shouting, unbuttoning their cuffs, offering free drinks that weren't free, really. There were hidden fees. I almost shied away, but drunk as I was, I stepped into the ring, right up to the blonde-haired girl, and let the carbonated fumes of her hip, long hair encourage me. "Hello," I said. "What keeps the planet spinning?" She turned around with her entire body. First eyes deep in blue, then she opened her arms, sounds all around quieting down, and replied with a "hi!" like a firecracker going off in the empty concert hall. Her mouth sheet music to mine eyes. Sustained for measures we were, just were, frozen, while she held her breath and waited for me to say something, to answer her question. But I stood silent because the question had been put to her, and everyone around us was looking on. The spotlight made us hot. The men around them switched from hunters to warriors, their spears pointed at me. My nails met my palms. I was ready. But I let it go as peace overcame me, and the blonde-haired lady put her hand on my shoulder and anointed me with the pulse of her palm, which was steady. She was waiting, and in her relaxed way of waiting, her proximity to my chest, her unwavering gaze told me, in more ways than one, that she wasn't a girl after all. She was a woman. "We were on the same train this morning." "I remember," she said. "You asked something in English." "I don't speak English." "No. I speak Fantasma." "It's my last name. It's what I speak, get it?" "That's selfish. No one will understand you if you only speak your own language." "You understand me now." "That is because we are speaking English, silly." She took a step forward. "No, not English. And no, not Fantasma, you're right. We are speaking American." "American, that is annoying." "Annoying, American, what's the difference?" "My name is Elida. Mikhail." "Nice to meet you, Mikhail." She told me she was on a weekend getaway with her best friend, Elsa. Both were from Holland. Elida had traveled from Amsterdam, Elsa from Paris. That's why they were meeting here halfway. Did day trips in the morning. Made sense. Our ice picks broke the frozen water beneath us. Then we floated into dance, closer and closer together, farther and farther from others, questions by questions, and the men around us gave up the charade and made room for Elida and me to shimmy to the cheery Irish bar pop tunes and indulge in one of life's simplest pleasures, making out in public. My veins pumped BAC to my brain, and my liver did the two-step. Elida kept smiling between kisses. Lavish local beer coated her tongue. Her skin felt like truffles. She shuffled, told me things. Her pacing, her saliva, all played a part. Our first kiss was natural. An hour later, Rick and I walked the two ladies to their spot. They were in a one-bedroom across the street from a mass of green and pink prostitutes and a centuries-old cathedral. Rick and Elsa led the way, turned their red fire hair every once in a while to chuckle at Elida and me, who followed and made out for half minutes every half block, till eventually the four of us got to the front door of their spot. That's when it started raining. Rick, with his hands in his pockets and with a toodaloo, said farewell to the women, headed to the dorms without me. I stalled, flirted, but Elida wasn't going to let me up, as much as we wanted to exchange more fluids. I'd asked if we could meet the next day. She affirmed with a whisper, "The Dali exhibit tomorrow, at Les Beaux-Arts." "You said we would meet there, remember?" "You told me about a Dali exhibit?" I asked, covering my eyes from the rain above. "Wow," she said, one foot in her apartment door. "Are you like a forgetful person or something?" "I am not forgetful," I said, walking backwards. "I am drugs." "Remember," she said, laughing, "be there." The trek back to the hostel was the same one from north of town Rick and I had taken earlier. Lucky for us, we knew the way, and didn't get lost walking through the rain at night. All right. Whew. Stay tuned. This book keeps on going. A lot more love, a lot more heartbreak. Summer Bob.